So that was all for our fast carbon pathways. But carbon's not always moving quickly. You know, it may move back and forth between being in a plant taken in by photosynthesis and then being respired back into the atmosphere, and that could happen, thousands of times for that carbon molecule. Or sometimes carbon molecules can get stuck. These carbon molecules in a slow carbon pathway are moving very slowly. I'm talking hundreds, thousands, millions of years, maybe even billions of years. That carbon ends up somewhere and stays there for a very long period of time. We refer to this as carbon storage, meaning that carbon is stuck there. It's not really moving anywhere, so we're saying it's stored in whatever structure that we're referring to. So one example of a slow carbon pathway are trees. Now, some trees don't live that long. They might live like 100 years, and that's still a significant amount of time. But I'm really talking about large trees, like really large trees. Excuse me. So a large tree like this is actually the largest tree in the world. This is in India. And trees, as well as other organisms, made up of carbon. But here we have lots of carbon in this tree. Tons and tons of carbon in this tree, and it's not going anywhere. For as long as that tree lives, and some trees can live thousands of years, for as long as that tree lives, that tree is storing carbon. Yes, it will lose its leaves every year, and so it loses some of its carbon. But here, through the entire trunk of this tree, this entire trunk has tons and tons of carbon in it. But it's not going anywhere. It's staying there. This website, which we're actually going to go ahead and look at together, this website shows some of the coolest trees out there. But I want to point out a couple of them because it's kind of amazing how much carbon are stored in some of these trees. So the oldest tree in the world, at least that we know of, is this tree. It doesn't look like much, but it's over 9,000 years old. And I mention that because, again, that's 9,000 years it's holding on the carbon. 9,000 years where that carbon's not going anywhere. So that's why we call it a carbon storage. It's not moving. What I really want to point out, so there's a couple cool trees on here that you can take a look at, is the tallest tree in the world. It is over 100 meters long. To put that in perspective, that is over a football field, the length of a football field. That's how large this tree is. Here's how it stacks up to the Statue of Liberty, to Big Ben. So some icons that are huge, and this tree is taller than those. And it's not just tall, it's incredibly wide as well. So here's a picture of it. This isn't actually one picture. This is many, many, many different pictures. But I'm going to zoom in for you. Oh, is this as far as it's going to let me go? Okay, well, there we go. So here's a man for scale. There's these people climbing this tree to do some sort of study on this tree. So I'm going to just keep scrolling down. There's another person here in the back. Here's another person. Here's another person. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Here's a person down here on the ground. That's insane. Not only is this tree really tall, it is a couple 100 years old, and again, it's all of that carbon, that Statue of Liberty worth of carbon, just stuck in this tree. Eventually that carbon will move. Eventually that tree will die, it'll decompose, and that carbon goes to the soil, but for now, it's stuck here. This is where it's going to remain for quite a long period of time. There's some other trees on here that you can take a look at. This is the biggest tree by volume, meaning it has the most tree in it. Again, all carbon. So really trying to drive home the point that carbon storage just means carbon is stuck somewhere and it's not really going somewhere. Another type of slow carbon pathway is found in the deep ocean. So there's a lot of organisms in the ocean that have shells, and these shells are made out of a material called calcium carbonate. Commit that to memory because we're going to come back to calcium carbonate in a future topic. This calcium carbonate is also what is found in chalk. for example, or in this picture, limestone. When those shelled organisms die, their bodies, the physical body inside that shell, will decompose and those nutrients get released. But that shell is a really hard surface that doesn't decompose, and instead it falls to the ocean floor, and this happens over and over again. Shelled organisms dying over and over again. And it lands on the ocean floor and it gets compressed and compressed and compressed until it's compressed so much that it starts transforming into a rock. Typically this rock is limestone. You can buy limestone. Limestone is used a lot in gardens. But this limestone is just those shells. It is, again, calcium. So you think of calcium like strong bones, and then carbonate. Carbonate, I'm actually going to give you the formula for this because, again, you will see this later on. So here's calcium, and then carbonate is CO3. A nice source of carbon right there. So all these shelled organisms all around the world in our oceans die. They go to the bottom, they get compressed over and over again, and get turned into a really hard rock. That rock's not going anywhere. It'll go somewhere if we as humans go and harvest it, but for the most part, like once that carbon's in that rock, that's about it. You might need to add a couple thousand years of weathering if that rock hits the surface for that carbon to re-enter the carbon cycle. And finally, the last carbon pathway, and the one that we'll talk about the most when it comes to climate change, are fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, naturally occurring. We as humans don't make them, we don't do anything with them. We just have learned how to use them. What fossil fuels are is they're plants and animals from long ago, talking hundreds of thousands, even millions of years ago. But it's plants and animals that did not decompose. Remember, if plants and animals decompose, that means the carbon and all the other nutrients get incorporated into the soil, which then get reincorporated into plants, into animals, they die, so on and so forth. These are plants and animals that didn't decompose, that their bodies, whether it's the leaves or a dinosaur or something, their bodies did not decompose. And we'll talk about why they wouldn't decompose in a moment. So what that means is, let's say in that tree, you've got all that carbon in that tree, and it didn't go anywhere. The tree died, but the carbon didn't go back into the soil. And what happens if this happens a lot, that tree and this tree and this tree, they all start compressing and stacking on top of each other. And you add a couple million years, some pressure and some heat, and bam, you have a fossil fuel. A fossil fuel such as coal, like you see in this picture, or you might have oil or natural gas. So all of those are just dead plants and animals that just didn't decompose, and instead were transformed into fossil fuels. So as a summary, the carbon cycle isn't much of a cycle, at least compared to the water cycle. There's all these different steps in the carbon cycle, and it's really characterized by how quickly does carbon move from one place to another. It can move fast, like in photosynthesis or decomposition, or it can move a little bit slower and be stored somewhere for hundreds, thousands, maybe even for a millennia, such as in our fossil fuels or in really large and really old trees. So keep that in mind as we continue talking about the carbon cycle and how humans are affecting that carbon cycle.